If you believe Middle Tennessee's newest congressman, he's not only a businessman, he's also an economist, a trained law enforcement officer, even an expert in international sex crimes.
But an exclusive News Channel 5 investigation discovered Andy Ogles' life story may not be nearly as dramatic as he sometimes makes it sound.
Our chief investigative reporter Phil Williams has been checking into this and this questionable resume he has.
Absolutely. Andy Ogles represents the newly redrawn 5th Congressional District, which includes parts of Davidson County as well as Williamson, Murray, Marshall, and Lewis. After the saga involving George Santos, we decided to take a look at the Murray County Republican and discovered a story that is sometimes not what it seems.
The House will be in order.
Not long after his election to Congress, freshman Andy Ogles found himself in the middle of the drama over the House Speaker.
Yeah, so I'm an economist.
Giving the Tennessee Republican a chance to introduce himself to a national audience.
What do you want to serve on?
Well, so I'm an economist.
It was a claim.
I'm an economist. I worked in economics, in healthcare.
Ogles had made on the campaign trail.
As an economist, I can tell you.
And repeated in his first meeting of the House Financial Services Committee.
As an economist.
Yet, like some of the questions surrounding his controversial colleague, New York Congressman George Santos, there's little evidence that Ogles ever received any formal training in economics. His congressional bio says he obtained a degree from Middle Tennessee State University, where he studied policy and economics. Yet the school refused to confirm Ogles' degree, citing a provision of federal law that allows students to block the release of their educational credentials. Which made me curious about why. Why would Congressman Ogles not want Tennessee voters to be able to verify that he is who he says he is?
And so I would think if he has a block, that there must be something wrong.
Democrat Heidi Campbell, who lost to Ogles in a campaign in a district that Republicans redrew to help their own candidate, had the same reaction. In response to our questions, Ogles released this image of a diploma for a Bachelor of Science degree from Middle Tennessee State in 2007 when he was 36. But what we discovered next
Wow.
surprised the candidate Ogles defeated.
Oh my gosh.
It was a resume from 2 years after he graduated where he listed a degree in international relations with minors in psychology and English. And likewise on this form for a background check in his own writing, no mention of economics.
I mean, that looks to me like somebody who doesn't have any background in economics.
What does that say about his claims?
I'm not surprised. I think that if you really dig into him and what he's done, you're probably going to find that there's a lot more where this came from.
The congressman's website also calls Ogles a nationally recognized expert on tax policy and health care, having been featured in numerous publications, including the Wall Street Journal and Investors Business Daily. But a search of those sites shows only 3 columns he wrote, 2 of them with another person, when he was a lobbyist for the conservative Americans for Prosperity, nothing independently citing him as an expert.
It might be a bit more credible if a news source had called him and said, quoted him on the basis that he was a national expert.
MTSU political science professor John Biles says the publication of those columns, like this one predicting the imminent demise of Obamacare, might not have that much to do with Ogles' personal credentials.
When you publish an article like this and it's under the name of your organization, you might be publishing as much because it reflects the views of the organization as because it reflects the particular expertise of the writer.
As a former member of law enforcement, works in international sex crimes, specifically child trafficking.
Then there are Ogles' claims.
My midlife crisis, I went into law enforcement, specifically, I worked in human trafficking.
To be an international sex crimes expert.
This is from firsthand experience for someone who worked in that space. I turned gray because of it.
In fact, we discovered Ogles was sworn in as a volunteer reserve deputy with the Williamson County Sheriff's Office in July 2009, a position he lost 2 years later for not meeting minimum standards, making no progress in field training, and failure to attend required meetings. A sheriff's spokesperson says there is nothing in Mr. Ogles' training or personnel file that indicates he had any involvement in international sex trafficking in his capacity as a reserve deputy.
I began working, volunteering my time. And
Ogles did some work in 2011 for Abolition International, a nonprofit founded by gospel artist Natalie Gratt. His congressional website claims Ogles was responsible for overseeing operations and investments in 12 countries.
and then I ended up becoming chief operating officer. And it was just one of those, I didn't really intend to set out to be so heavily involved in the fight against human trafficking. It just kind of occurred. And
privately, people associated with the group dispute Ogles' characterization of his role. In fact, the group's tax returns show Ogles held a part-time position that paid him a grand total of $4,000.
$4,000?
$4,000.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that does not sound to me like somebody who was the COO.
And an archived version of the group's website shows it was making grants to holistic ministries in just a handful of countries, not 12 countries, and certainly not busting international sex rings.
If this information had come out, would it have made any difference?
Yeah, I think it might have. My election's over, and I've moved on, and that's fine. But I do think going forward, people need to know who they're electing.
Tonight, there are new questions about Middle Tennessee's newest congressman. Now, this follows an exclusive News Channel 5 investigation that's now making national headlines. An investigation of Andy Ogles' claims to be an economist, a former law enforcement officer, even an international sex crimes expert.
So what about his claims to have attended graduate school? If anybody has the answer, it would be our chief investigative reporter, Phil Williams. So, Phil, what is the answer?
Well, he has certainly made that claim in places, but the truth will likely only add to the controversy surrounding the Murray County Republican.
I love you people challenging me to cover the story. Of course I'm going to cover the story. It's news.
It was the talk of the town during morning drive time.
And so basically the accusation is Andy has been enhancing or exaggerating what he's done.
As talk radio's Dan Mendes took on the questions raised by News Channel 5 Investigates.
Well, so I'm an economist.
I'm an economist.
You know, as an economist,
Andy Ogles' congressional website claims he graduated from MTSU, where he studied policy and economics. But we obtained a resume showing the Tennessee Republican's degree was not in economics, but in international relations with minors in psychology and English.
So when Andy says, and he has many times, that he is an economist, what exactly does that mean?
Mendes pointed to Ogles' biography on the political website Ballotpedia.
Now, Ballotpedia says that Andy Ogles received a BS in International Relations from MTSU and went to Vanderbilt University's Owen Graduate School of Management, as well as Dartmouth College's Tuck School of Business. So I don't know.
In fact, for a candidate's questionnaire in his hometown newspaper when he ran for Murray County Mayor in 2018, Ogles listed his employment as economist and tax expert and claimed graduate education from Vanderbilt's respected Owen School. A bio for the conservative Club for Growth also says he pursued his graduate work in marketing at Vanderbilt's Owen School of Management.
Andy Ogles, come on up.
But listen to how he hesitated when asked about that at a GOP candidates forum.
But he's also an Owen School of Business graduate, right?
executive education, yes, ma'am.
Awesome.
The truth we discovered is that Ogles received certificates for participating in non-degree classes at Vanderbilt and Dartmouth. Dartmouth says their online classes were produced with an outside vendor. Ogles got a certificate in marketing for which Dartmouth's webpage listed 6 courses, each of which could be completed in 2 to 3 hours. Hardly an advanced degree.
As a former member of law enforcement, works in international sex crimes, specifically child trafficking.
Then there are Ogles' questionable claims to be a former member of law enforcement, really a volunteer reserve sheriff's deputy for about 2 years. Curiously, Ogles went through a contested Republican primary without his claims ever being challenged.
Local media is somewhat hollowed out from what it used to be.
MTSU political science professor John Viles says just like the situation with Congressman George Santos, candidates can slip through because of declining media resources as well as a decline in the power of political parties.
You know, one of the downsides of political parties was the notion of people meeting in smoke-filled rooms and coming to decisions. But one of the advantages was some of these sort of old timers had a better idea of, people's reputation outside of the media.
Now, the types of courses that Andy Ogles took at Vanderbilt and Dartmouth are called executive education. They're designed to help people with their careers, but they're not where you would go to get a degree to be an economist, for example.
Looks good on a resume, though.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks,
Thank
Will.
you.
What it shows is the level of the section that he's willing to participate in order to get elected to the United States Congress, and that's disturbing.
Can we talk to you just quickly?
What was in Congressman Andy Ogles' college transcript that he didn't want you to see? Tonight, News Channel 5 Investigates has the answer. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rory Johnston.
And I'm Vicki Yates. Middle Tennessee's newest congressman is a self-proclaimed economist who, it turns out, barely passed a community college economics course, and that's not all.
And News Channel 5's recent investigation of Andy Ogles went national. And our chief investigative reporter, Phil Williams, has now uncovered a potential bombshell. And Phil, this is evidence that Andy Ogles still has not been telling the whole truth, right?
That's exactly correct. The congressman had tried to make sure that no one would ever get to the information that we've discovered. But now, based on what we've found, Andy Ogles has a new story that he just misunderstood what kind of degree he got. Congressman, can we talk to you just quickly?
Hey, how are you?
Like his Republican colleague George Santos, freshman Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles has made big claims.
So I'm an economist.
I'm an economist.
As an economist,
His congressional bio says Ogles graduated from Middle Tennessee State University, where he studied policy and economics. Yet our investigation dug up a 2009 resume where he listed a degree in international relations, not economics, minoring in psychology and English.
But MTSU had a broader poli-sci degree, which was international relations.
On Nashville Talk Radio, Ogles, who was one of the 20 House holdouts in Kevin McCarthy's speaker election, insisted economics was part of his international relations degree. But Ogles claimed he put a block on the university confirming his academic credentials because he was worried about his identity being stolen.
And I would encourage anyone to lock down your transcripts, lock down your credit so that you're not a victim of identity theft.
Now we have what Congressman Ogles didn't want you to see, his college transcript. That transcript, submitted by Ogles with a job application more than a decade ago, shows his major wasn't in economics nor international relations, but in liberal studies, a type of degree generally for those who cannot settle on a major. And contrary to Ogles' claims,
as an economist,
the transcript shows he enrolled in just one economics class, a community college Principles of Economics course, where he got a C.
Taking one course when you're a freshman or sophomore in college does not make you an economist. And if he's willing to run around and say, hey, I'm an economist, who knows what else he's going to tell you that's not truthful.
Randy Stamps is former political director for the Tennessee Republican Party and a former GOP lawmaker. Last fall, Stamps broke with his party, supporting Ogles' Democratic opponent, State Senator Heidi Campbell.
But even before the election, I didn't believe anything he said.
Does this reflect why you endorsed his Democratic opponent?
Absolutely. With all due respect, I kind of saw this coming, that he was going to embarrass our state.
Ogles' transcript shows he did take some political science courses where he did fairly well. But in the fall of 1995, the future congressman enrolled in U.S. presidency, problems in government, political theory, and national security policy, and flunked every one of them. And 3 years later, it happened again. Finally, in 2007, Ogles went back to college and finished the liberal studies degree with a 2.4 GPA. So what does the congressman have to say? During last week's congressional break, we went to Ogles' hometown in search of answers, checking out the Columbia address listed on his website as his new congressional office.
Your call has been forwarded.
Then we called,
Congressman, this is Phil Williams.
and texted.
We'll see if we hear back.
When we didn't hear back, we headed to the Nashville airport as Ogles prepared to fly back to Washington.
So how did you forget what your major was in college? Sir, don't you think voters deserve an explanation?
Sorry.
how are you?
But the Congressman
We can stop right here and talk to you if you're willing to talk to us.
continued to ignore our questions.
Yeah, we tried.
Don't know what more we can do. Don't know why he doesn't want to talk to us.
I think the level of the deception is surprising to me, that you have helped uncover.
Our investigation also discovered other claims.
As a former member of law enforcement, works in international sex crimes, specifically child trafficking,
that have also been exaggerated. For example, Ogles' congressional website claims that he worked with a human trafficking group, quote, overseeing operations and investments in 12 countries. In fact, that group, Abolition International, was not in 12 countries during his limited time with the organization.
Now, he's still deceiving. He's still not forthcoming. He I don't believe, has the courage to sit down and talk it through and apologize for misrepresenting himself to the people of Tennessee. Until he does that, I don't think he's worthy of the office.
In an apparent effort to get ahead of our story, Congressman Ogles released a statement to other media last night, claiming he had just requested a copy of his transcript and had discovered that his degree was not in international relations after all, and he apologized for what he called a misstatement. But get this, that new statement says he majored in liberal studies and minored in political science and English. His old resume said he minored in English and psychology. MTSU tells me any minors a person receives would be reflected on the transcript. And guess what? None of those are listed there.
I think a lot of people would like to have him sit down, answer some tough questions in front of an environment that's not necessarily friendly.
Right. Is that door still open?
Absolutely. You know, that we were serious about wanting to hear his side, and we would hope that he would eventually accept the invitation to sit down and answer our questions.
All right, we'll have to wait and see.
Thanks, Bill.
What did Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles do with tens of thousands of dollars meant for a children's burial garden?
Tonight, News Channel 5 Investigates looks for answers to some difficult questions about Middle Tennessee's newest Congressman. Thanks for joining us tonight at 6, everybody. I'm Hunter Hoagland in for Rory.
And I'm Vicki Yates. These are questions that Andy Ogles has refused to answer, questions about how he raked in the money after the loss of a child.
And News Channel 5's chief investigative reporter Phil Williams heard from some of the people who not only opened up their hearts, but also their wallets to the Congressman.
And this is a tough story to tell, Phil.
Without a doubt. In fact, we wrestled with how to tell this story. But what made us decide this was a story that had to be told was the Maury County Republicans' refusal to provide evidence that what he did was on the up and up.
Congressman, this doesn't have to be a story if you can just offer some evidence it went for a good cause. This is a story about Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles that goes far beyond questions about his inflated resume.
Well, so I'm an economist. You know, as an economist,
It's a story that stems from a personal tragedy, the stillborn death of a child whose photo Ogles sometimes posts on his political social media. A story so sensitive that the people involved are reluctant to comment publicly.
Another donor who called me said he almost felt guilty about calling. You feel the same way? It just feels like a topic you can't touch. It's taboo.
But the story we heard repeatedly was how 2 days after the loss of the child in 2014, Ogles himself used a photo of his stillborn baby for a GoFundMe for something he called Lincoln's Place. It implored, help us help other families. No family should have to bury their child. No child should be alone. It promised a burial garden that would create a place for Lincoln's new play friends, a life-size statue of Jesus watching over the children, along with benches for families to sit while surrounded by flowers. And people responded to Ogles' emotional plea, donating almost $25,000. GoFundMe confirms Ogles got the money.
You want to believe that that money went to something good.
Yet the donors we spoke with described what they called gnawing questions about what happened to those funds.
Of course, this would not be a story if the future congressman had taken the money and used it as promised, or at least for a good cause. But here in the cemetery where Lincoln is buried, we checked from one corner to another. And just like the tipsters had feared, there is no children's burial garden, no benches for families to sit, no life-size statue of Jesus.
In fact, a Tennessean newspaper story a year after the GoFundMe diplomatically raised the question of what happened with the money, quoting Ogles as blaming government bureaucracy. He claimed, "What we found over the past year as we have been going through this process is that burials are heavily regulated." He insisted none of the money had been spent. A local funeral director was also quoted saying she still planned to meet with the family to help organize a unified effort to aid parents dealing with the financial and emotional trauma of bearing children. 8 years later, that funeral director now says, quote, "Back at that time, we could have helped them do something, but they never came back to us." And the manager at the cemetery where Lincoln is buried says he met with Ogles a couple of times, but then he never came back. Neither knows what happened to the nearly $25,000 that people contributed.
Honestly, in this case, I hope he's able to provide me with documentation that the money went for a good cause.
So we asked the congressman's office, but we never got an answer from them.
Hey, Congressman, can we talk to you?
Nor from Ogles himself.
What did you do with the money that people donated for Lincoln's place? Congressman, this doesn't have to be a story if you can just offer some evidence it went for a good cause.
In the freshman congressman, some may see reminders of George Santos.
I knew I was being scammed.
And the disabled veteran whose service dog needed life-saving surgery. George Santos ran a GoFundMe, but then kept the money. The dog later died.
What would be your message to Andy Ogles?
This donor's message, "Tell us what you did. Tell us where the money went." It was a message.
Was the money used the way you said it was? Congressman, are you not concerned about how this looks?
Apparently lost on the congressman.
Candidate Ogles did speak about the loss of the child at one political event last summer, describing how it was difficult to get insurance to pay the medical bills. He somehow blamed Obamacare, claiming it prevented his health insurance and his wife's health insurance from talking to each other and working out who would pay. But as we've seen in other cases with Andy Ogles, it's just really hard to know what to believe.
It is, and you've been covering all the angles. As far as you've been able to tell, though, did he just keep all this money?
Well, I did speak with one donor who said that he asked Andy Ogles directly what he did with the money. He says Ogles refused to give him a straight answer, so he insisted on getting his money back, and he did. But other donors tell me they were never given that option.
And the door is always open for him to explain, right?
Absolutely. We would love for him to sit down and show us that it went for a good cause, but that's up to him.
All right. Thanks so much, Phil.
A new day brings new stories from Congressman Andy Ogles as he attempts to explain away a controversial GoFundMe drive. Hi, everyone. I'm Rory Johnston.
And I'm Carrie Sharp. News Channel 5 first revealed how the Murray County Republican raked in tens of thousands of dollars following the loss of a child. It was supposed to go for a children's burial garden, but that never happened.
Our chief investigative reporter, Phil Williams, continues to try to sort out the facts from Ogles' fictions.
As we first reported, we had hoped that Andy Ogles would be able to tell us what he did with the money, that it wouldn't be a story. Instead, he waited until after the story broke. Then he went on the attack with this statement, in some cases coming up with brand new explanations. Congressman, this doesn't have to be a story if you can just offer some evidence it went for a good cause.
We had told Andy Ogles that all he had to do was explain what he did with the money from a 2014 GoFundMe where he used a photo of his stillborn baby to collect money for what he called Lincoln's Place. It was supposed to be a children's burial garden that would create a place for Lincoln's new play friends, a life-size statue of Jesus watching over the children, along with benches for families to sit while surrounded by flowers. The GoFundMe raked in almost $25,000. In fact, as we discovered, there is no children's burial garden, and the congressman had refused to tell us what he did with the money.
Was the money used the way you said it was? Congressman, are you not concerned about how this looks?
Ogles later put out this statement portraying himself as a victim. Quote, "I knew politics could be ruthless, but I never expected it to sink to such disgusting lows as to have a reporter calling around to my close friends asking about the death and burial site of our beloved son, Lincoln."
For starters, that's just not true. All the donors I spoke with called me. I didn't call them. The congressman is just making this up.
Back in 2015, when the Tennessean followed up on what happened with the money, Ogles blamed government bureaucracy. Quote, "What we've found over the past year as we have been going through this process is that burials are heavily regulated. In fact, there's no evidence that government regulation had anything to do with it." So in his latest statement, Ogles comes up with a new story. Quote, "What we raised wasn't enough for our original goal."
Which made us wonder, what was the original goal? According to a Facebook post we found, Ogles told donors he wanted to raise enough money to purchase 20 burial sites to donate to families who lose their children.
We checked with the cemetery where the Ogles child is buried, and in 2014, plots were selling for $1,200 each, meaning Ogles had enough money to buy 19 plots, almost enough for 20. And the cemetery manager says we could have started out with what was reasonable and worked up from there. Still, the embattled congressman who has made up stories about his resume now asks people to trust him, and his claims that he used the money for covering the cost of funeral expenses and other needs for families he has refused to name.
Last night, I texted Congressman Ogles reminding him that I would still love to see his receipts to let him show that the money people gave out of sympathy really did go for a good cause. Unfortunately, I never heard back. Phil Williams, News Channel 5 Investigates.
Tonight, News Channel 5 Investigates follows the money involving Middle Tennessee's newest member of Congress.
But instead of finding answers, that investigation turns up even more questions about Andy Ogles. Good evening to you. I'm Carrie Sharp.
And I'm Rory Johnston. Among those questions, where did Ogles get $320,000 that he claims to have loaned his campaign?
Our chief investigative reporter, Phil Williams, has been searching for that answer. Phil?
You know, what makes this question so intriguing is, one, Andy Ogles has never been seen as a person of great wealth. On top of that, now that he's in Congress, he has not disclosed any substantial investments. He doesn't even report having a checking account.
I can tell you that we have a problem at the border.
From the beginning of Andy Ogles' 2022 campaign for Congress, the Murray County Republican was dogged by questions about his fundraising claims, with even conservative media noting he was 3 days late filing his first campaign finance report, then 6 days late, still not filing it 7 days past the filing deadline. Talk radio was skeptical of Ogles' excuses.
There were, quote, issues retrieving bank records.
You're kidding me. That's not a credible statement. Issues retrieving bank statements? I mean, this is 2022.
Ogles had kicked off his campaign claiming he had raised $453,000 in the first 30 days. But when the report was eventually filed, he had raised far less, only $254,000. Still, Ogles also reported he personally loaned his campaign $320,000, supposedly giving himself a formidable war chest.
I think the biggest question is, where did this money come from? It's not clear from his financial disclosure reports where he got the money for this loan.
Daniel Caputo works for the Washington watchdog group, the Campaign Legal Center. We had pulled Ogles' personal financial disclosures, which are required by law, listing assets that included an investment property, as well as 3 retirement accounts held by Ogles and his wife. Missing from Ogles' report is any reference to any bank accounts or other assets of more than $1,000, which must be disclosed.
So it definitely raises, big questions as to where did that money come from and how was he able to loan it? Because currently his financial disclosure reports are not showing that sort of wealth that he could easily lend that money.
I will not be resigning.
It's a transparency issue that has been highlighted by the George Santos case. A recent indictment accuses the New York congressman of falsely reporting that he had loaned his committee significant sums of money when he had not made the reported loans and in fact did not have the funds necessary to make such loans at the time. He did it, the indictment says, for the purpose of making the committee appear more financially sound than it was.
For watchdogs like yourself, is there any way to tell where this money came from?
Currently, no. So it definitely begs the question of is there something that's just missing from the financial disclosure report? Is there something that we'll see later? Maybe he just forgot to include it.
On the other hand, Ogles' personal financial disclosures show loans that include a home mortgage from InterFirst and a line of credit from Bancorp South. Property records showed that line of credit was dropped, but we discovered documents showing another line of credit taken out last year from First Bank that listed his in-laws on the note for a total of $700,000. Ogles did not disclose that loan on his personal financial disclosure.
So this seems to be a pretty big question mark as to why it was not included in his financial disclosure report, because there doesn't seem to be any reason why it was not.
So how did you forget what your major was in college?
This all follows questions raised earlier this year by News Channel 5 Investigates about how Ogles inflated his educational credentials and business experience.
Congressman, this doesn't have to be a story if you can just offer some evidence it went for a good cause.
Then we uncovered evidence about a GoFundMe where Ogles raised money for a children's burial garden that was never built, raking in almost $25,000. Ogles has not released any evidence of what he did with the money.
The public has a right to know what your financial obligations are.
As for the questions about the money that Ogles supposedly loaned his own campaign and the line of credit he failed to disclose.
No, there's definitely, I think a lot more questions are raised by these financial disclosure reports than are answered by them.
So how does Andy Ogles explain any of this? Well, we just don't know. I sent an email to his office. I even texted his personal cell phone asking if he would show us evidence that what he has reported is true, but unfortunately he has not responded.
This is a tactic we've seen before, and we know you want to get his side of the story.
Absolutely. We have walked away from stories when people were able to answer our questions.
And we know you will keep asking until you get some answers.
Exactly.
Phil, thank you.
Good evening. Here at 6, we are continuing to follow that breaking news exclusive involving Andy Ogles.
That news, a federal search warrant served on the Tennessee congressman. Hi, everyone. A lot to get to here at 6 o'clock. I'm Hunter Hoagland alongside Jennifer Krause. Tonight, Ogles is saying FBI agents seized his cell phone.
Chief investigative reporter Phil Williams has been working to break this story now for several days. Phil, we know these stories are not easy to break, but you got to the bottom of it.
That's right, and that's because the people who know the most are not allowed under federal law to comment. While there's been a lot that we do not know, what we do know tonight is this: Andy Ogles appears to be in serious trouble.
I'm an economist.
As an economist, I can tell you, as an economist.
The congressman who our investigation discovered fabricated much of his resume during his 2022 campaign, including his claims to be a trained economist, now finds himself at the center of an FBI investigation. Knowledgeable sources had confirmed that FBI agents served the first-term Republican with some sort of search warrant last Friday, the day after he won his primary election as he seeks a second term. Less clear was the exact scope of the search. Did federal agents show up at the congressman's home seen here from Sky 5 in rural Murray County? We don't have the answer to that question. What we do know is what Ogles put in a statement on X saying, last Friday, the FBI took possession of my cell phone.
I think the fact that Congressman Ogles went from $320,000 in, a loan to his campaign to $20,000 is very odd.
All of this comes amid questions about the congressman's campaign finances. After News Channel 5 Investigates raised questions about Ogles' claim to have loaned $320,000 to his campaign, Ogles filed a new series of reports with the Federal Election Commission back in May, admitting it wasn't true. Now, like his friend George Santos, Andy Ogles finds himself in the white-hot glare of a federal criminal investigation.
Why does it say that you're not willing to offer that kind of comment? In the statement posted on social media, Congressman Ogles continued to downplay what he called, quote, honest mistakes in his campaign finances, and he pledged to work with federal authorities as they continue their investigations.
Your investigations have led to a lot of these criminal federal investigations. With what little we know about this one, what do you make of this going forward?
Well, to put it simply, for a federal judge to issue a search warrant, the FBI has to demonstrate probable cause to believe that a crime has occurred occurred, not just a violation of policy. And they have to show that evidence of that crime is likely to be found in the place being searched, in this case, apparently his cell phone.
And that's got to be based on actual evidence. They can't just go fishing, hoping to find this evidence, right?
No, and that's why it's likely that the FBI knows a lot more than we know tonight.
Mm-hmm. We know you'll be watching. Phil, thank you for that report.
Tonight, News Channel 5 Investigates uncovers new information about a criminal investigation of a sitting Middle Tennessee congressman. More than 5 months since FBI agents served Andy Ogles with a search warrant, we've now learned that he and a team of high-powered lawyers have so far managed to tie up the investigation in federal court. News Channel 5 Chief Investigative Reporter Phil Williams has the exclusive new details.
As we first reported back in the fall, FBI agents surprised Andy Ogles with a search warrant at his home in August, seizing his personal cell phone. And thanks to these court filings we've obtained, we now know they also served a second search warrant on Google for his personal email.
That's why Andy Ogles stepped forward to rescue a hurting country.
The FBI investigation of Congressman Andy Ogles began amid questions first raised by News Channel 5 Investigates about the Murray County Republicans' 2022 campaign for Congress, specifically his claim on federal reports to have personally loaned his campaign $320,000 of his own money that our investigation discovered he did not appear to have. Similar questions led to a federal indictment of New York Congressman George Santos on federal fraud charges, leading to his eventual guilty plea and resignation. Back in September, Ogles filed this emergency motion for return of the property seized by the FBI.
Part of this certainly was a delay tactic. If I were cynical, I would say perhaps the November election had something to do with the desire to delay.
Veteran Nashville lawyer Gary Blackburn questioned part of Ogles' argument that he is not what the Department of Justice categorizes as a target of the FBI investigation, someone who may just be a step away from indictment. Rather, he is considered a, quote, subject. Ogles' brief argues that the federal government's actions are troublesome because even its own prosecutors admit that they do not have substantial evidence linking Congressman Ogles to the commission of a crime. Now, he says, I'm not a target of the investigation, I'm only a subject.
That's a distinction and without a difference at this juncture.
To be clear, a subject is someone who is the subject of a criminal investigation.
If you get information that the United States thinks that you are a subject in a criminal investigation, you need to call a lawyer.
In their response, federal prosecutors insist that they never made any such statements, quote, admitting that they do not have substantial evidence linking Ogles to a crime.
That means that they believe he's involved in something that may turn out to be criminal, and there may be others involved other than him.
Based on your experience, is it likely that other subpoenas have been issued for bank records, that type of thing?
Yes.
You know, coming from a family who's had family members served.
Part of Ogles' argument is that under the Constitution's speech and debate clause, members of Congress cannot be questioned for what they say in Congress, which his attorneys argue means the FBI should not be able to see anything on his phone or email related to legislative business. The government says that argument is bogus, although they agreed not to look at the evidence until a judge rules. Months later, there has been no ruling from the court.
This has constitutional implications, involves public officials. The United States House of Representatives filed an amicus brief. You know, this judge is going to want to get it right.
Andy Ogles, he's running is my complete and total endorsement.
Now with Ogles' ally Donald Trump about to return to office, Blackburn says his question is, will the investigation be allowed to proceed by a Trump Justice Department?
I hope that the incoming president is responsible enough to let justice take its course.
You hope?
I hope. Yes, I hope.
A recently released congressional ethics report confirmed our suspicions that Andy Ogles did not actually loan his campaign that $320,000. Now we wait to see if either the House Ethics Committee or the Department of Justice will do anything with that information. Phil Williams, News Channel 5 Investigates.
Thank you, Phil. By the way, Phil did reach out today to Congressman Ogles' attorney, but Alex Little declined to comment.
The new year brought news of fresh legal troubles for Middle Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles, who now faces a congressional investigation into a $320,000 contribution that he appears to have completely fabricated. News Channel 5 Chief Investigative Reporter Phil Williams first exposed that discrepancy more than a year ago. He's now discovered that the news for Ogles appears to be even worse than initially reported.
The day after New Year's, the House Ethics Committee released a report that at first blush appeared to be just a recommendation for an investigation of Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles. But a closer reading reveals that the Maury County Republican is already facing that investigation.
The public really should know that this was a likely serious violation. There is substantial evidence to believe that these violations occurred.
Daniel Caputo works with the nonpartisan Campaign Legal Center, which filed an ethics complaint against Congressman Andy Ogles following our News Channel 5 investigation.
Can we talk to you just quickly?
That investigation first exposed Ogles' misrepresentations about his educational and professional credentials.
What did you do with the money that people donated for Lincoln's Place?
Later raising questions about the thousands of dollars he raised for a children's burial garden that was never built.
Where did Ogles get $320,000 that he claims to have loaned his campaign?
All of which led to questions we uncovered about the $320,000 that Ogles reported having personally loaned his campaign back in 2022, even though Ogles' personal financial disclosures did not reveal him having that kind of money. Last week, the House Ethics Committee released this report where the Office of Congressional Ethics had investigated and concluded back in August that Representative Ogles reported loaning his campaign $320,000, but he never loaned his campaign that amount.
This is, a concerning instance of a member of Congress appearing to lie on his financial disclosure reports, his campaign committee reports to both Congress and to the Federal Election Commission.
Rather than dismissing the complaint against Ogles, the Ethics Committee announced it had decided to extend the committee's review of the matter.
So this is telling us that there actually is a House ethics investigation.
Yes, so the House Ethics Committee has specifically stated themselves that they are investigating.
The new documents revealed that investigators interviewed Ogles' campaign treasurer Thomas Datweiler and Chief of Staff Grant Henry, who both claimed to be in the dark about the congressman's finances. Datweiler testified, quote, "I work with 24 congressmen, 5 senators. He's the only one that I don't have access to his bank account."
There's clearly something happening here that's interesting that both the treasurer and the campaign manager aren't really aware or apprised of what's happening and are having to take the word of the congressman himself.
Behind the scenes, Ogles' team was lashing out at News Channel 5's reporting about the questionable $320,000 contribution. The report includes Grant Henry's text message to someone that, quote, "the liar Phil is at it again," and, quote, "Phil is essentially a narcissist with borderline sociopathic tendencies. He leeches from anything that will get his own name in the headlines."
The fact that the process is moving forward to begin with is quite significant.
Caputo says the fact that the Ethics Committee has not cleared Ogles says a lot about the state of their investigation.
Generally speaking, the House Ethics Committee saw the report, started to conduct their own investigation, and seemingly saw that there was something significant here and now are continuing their investigation further.
The preliminary report also says that Congressman Ogles refused to cooperate with the investigation, as did members of his family and his banks, and it recommended that they be subpoenaed and forced to testify. That was back in August. Because the House Ethics Committee's process is confidential, we don't know if that has yet happened. Phil Williams, News Channel 5 Investigates.
Tonight, News Channel 5 Investigates uncovers brand new questions about a Middle Tennessee congressman who has left a trail of scandal. Good evening to you. I'm Carrie Sharp.
And I'm Kelsey Gibbs. Those new questions center around Congressman Andy Ogles and the stories he tells about how he spent money from his campaign. Among the questions, why could we not find evidence that some of the companies he says he paid actually exists?
And that comes as Ogles is already facing an FBI investigation as a result of questions previously uncovered by our chief investigative reporter,
Phil Williams.
Well, as you both know, under federal law, congressional candidates are supposed to provide a full accounting of exactly how they spend their campaign money to make sure it's being spent for legitimate purposes. But what we've now discovered only adds to the questions that have dogged Andy Ogles since his early days in Congress. So how did you forget what your major was in college? Over the last 2 years, our investigation has exposed how Congressman Andy Ogles fabricated large parts of his resume, including his professional credentials.
So I'm an economist.
You
know, as an economist,
There were also questions about how the Murray County Republican used the stillborn death of a child to raise thousands of dollars for a children's burial garden that was never built. Congressman, this doesn't have to be a story if you can just offer some evidence it went for a good cause. And our investigation exposed how he did not appear to have the $320,000 he claimed to have personally loaned his campaign back in 2022. Ogles later admitted it wasn't true, and the FBI opened a criminal investigation. And yet through it all, hi there, this is Phil Williams. I'm calling to verify some campaign expenditures. We had never taken a hard look at how Ogles claimed to have spent money from his campaign until now. In 2022 and 2024, Andy Ogles reported spending thousands of dollars with a company called JL Tech Sales. He initially said it was located on Access Road in Chattanooga, and it was for office supplies, internet, and TV services. Those expenditures to JL Tech Sales would total more than $14,000. But when we searched that address in Chattanooga, there's a company there called Technology Sales, but you see on the sign, plexiglass, nylon, Teflon is what their services are. Nothing about office supplies, nothing about TV or internet services. Eventually, I reached the company at that address. So he says he purchased office supplies, internet, and TV services. Is that anything your company would do?
No.
And there's never been another company by that name at this address?
Oh, no. This business has been here 25, 30 years.
our nation deserves nothing less than full transparency.
In fact, about the time that the FBI began investigating his campaign, Ogles amended his financial reports to say that JL Tech Sales was actually at 134 Main Street in Pennington Gap, Virginia. And these reports said the money was just for office supplies. And when we search for a company with that name and that address in Virginia, we come up with nothing. So early one morning, I set out in search of answers, driving across the state through Knoxville up into the mountains of Western Virginia, making my way nearly 5 hours later to Pennington Gap, the tiny town where Ogles claimed to have bought thousands of dollars in office supplies. And here in Pennington Gap, Virginia, this is 134 Main Street, but what I would find here would only raise more questions. I'm trying to verify, is there a company called JL Tech Sales at this address?
So, yeah, but that's not office supplies.
Outside that address, I met a man who refused to identify himself, who said he operated a company out of that office with a different name, but he insisted he sends its bills out as JL Tech. But you won't tell me your name?
No, I don't need to tell you any of that, any stuff, any further.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
At this point, it seemed like our conversation was over, but just before I got ready to head back to Tennessee, the man decided to come back out for one more conversation. I'm trying to get on the record. Okay, what is the truth?
So, all right, we don't sell office supplies.
Okay.
We provided for Andy texting services and ringless voicemail services for his campaign.
Okay.
So when he was campaigning, we would send out bulk texts to the databases that he provided, inviting people to his events or whatever he had going on in his campaign. Right. That's all we did for him.
The man said he did work for Ogles back in 2022, but we had reports where Ogles said he also paid JL Tech Sales in 2024. That's when the man said he billed Ogles for work that was never done and had never gotten around to paying the money back.
Well, there sort of is this question about why that money hasn't been refunded or reported as being refunded.
Roger Weand is senior researcher for the Nonpartisan Campaign Legal Center, which works to hold government accountable.
It certainly does raise a question as to why this reporting was not being, done in a transparent way the first time around.
And the fact that I had to drive to Virginia to try to get answers, that's not how this is supposed to work.
Absolutely. The public should not have to go through that process to have complete, accurate, transparent information about their representatives' campaign finances.
In Ogles' campaign reports, we also discovered $1,100 spent with something called In a Par in Gallatin, Tennessee for fundraising event fees. The street address isn't a real address, and we could not find anyone who had ever heard of it. He also reported paying Venmo for office supplies, one payment of $520, another for $1,000, and a third payment for campaign consulting, another $2,000.
I would say that those transactions in particular are very concerning because the purposes for which the transactions were reported are not services that Venmo appears to provide.
Then there's a $1,000 expenditure to a company supposedly called Strategic Avanscale for campaign consulting. So we checked and we could not find a company by that name anywhere in the country. And when we checked the address, it comes back to a UPS store in Washington, D.C.
It does seem unusual that there isn't more information out there about the company, and it certainly raises questions that should be answered.
Another thing that caught our attention, $55,000 paid out to 8 different people in 2022 who all list the same mailing address in Washington, D.C. We looked, and it's actually an office building. Among the recipients, a Stein Erickson. We could not find anyone by that name in Tennessee or D.C. And R. Chris, we don't know if that's a first or last name, and John Smith.
That's another situation in which vendors, including staff members for the campaign who are being paid by the campaign, voters have a right to know precisely who they are. And donors do as well.
All of it raises questions that Weand says deserve answers from an elected official who has left a trail of unanswered questions. And tonight we do have an answer of sorts from Congressman Ogles' office. In an email statement, his chief of staff insisted that all of the expenditures in question are legitimate campaign expenses and have been verified as such. He blamed third-party software for causing what he called minor errors to a small number of expense entries. He added, quote, "We are working on providing the Federal Election Commission with updated information regarding these legitimate campaign expenses." But just to be clear, we asked for documentation that would prove all of those expenditures were indeed legitimate, but that's not something they provided.
I know you're going to keep following up on that part, but what about this FBI investigation? What's the status of that?
Well, so far, Ogles' attorneys have managed to keep the FBI from looking at the evidence they seized from him last fall, actually last August. We're still waiting on a federal magistrate here in Nashville to rule on their motions. In the meantime, the Trump Justice Department has taken over the case, removing local prosecutors. Right now, it's not clear if the Trump administration, intends to shield him from potential prosecution. We just don't know.
Oh, wow. Well, Phil, of course, we appreciate you, and we know you're going to stay on top of this.
Absolutely.
All right. And if you can, go to newschannel5.com right now. At the bottom of Phil's latest investigation, you'll find links to all of his previous reports on Andy Ogles.
For almost 2 years, the FBI waited for court approval to look at evidence seized from Middle Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles. But tonight, the Department of Justice has signaled it is ready to return or destroy that evidence, handing a big win to the Maury County Republican.
The investigation followed questions raised first by News Channel 5's chief investigative reporter Phil Williams. Phil, the FBI never even got to take a good look at the evidence, right?
Never got a look at all. It's one of the strangest cases I've ever seen, certainly the most prolonged. The congressman and his lawyer, Alex Little, say this is a victory for the rule of law. Others see it as another example of the Trump administration taking care of its friends. Can we talk to you just quickly? At the center of the investigation were questions about whether Andy Ogles may have committed fraud in filing reports about his campaign finances when he first ran for Congress in 2022.
Where did Ogles get $320 $20,000 that he claims to have loaned his campaign.
As our investigation first revealed, the Murray County Republican claimed to have personally loaned his campaign $320,000, even though there was no evidence he had that kind of money. He later admitted the real number was just $20,000.
Future generations will look back at this moment in American history.
My investigation also first revealed that FBI agents had executed a search warrant to seize Ogles' personal cell phone in August 2024, as well as another warrant for his Gmail records. But Ogles' team filed an emergency motion in U.S. District Court to block agents from looking at that evidence, claiming no one from the executive branch should be able to look at the personal communications of a sitting member of the legislative branch. For reasons that are not clear, the federal courts had not acted on that motion for the past 19 months. Then today, Ogles' team notified the court that the government has advised defense counsel that it will promptly return or destroy the property and information obtained pursuant to the respective search warrants at issue, all but signaling that the criminal investigation of Andy Ogles is now officially at an end. And today, Congressman Ogles issued a statement expressing his gratitude to the Trump Justice Department for righting this wrong and to his legal team for, quote, fighting for me every step of the way. Meanwhile, his Democratic opponent in his first congressional race, State Senator Heidi Campbell, had a much different reaction. She posted on social media, "What is wrong with MAGA that they're perfectly okay with full-on criminals as long as they wear red hats?" But this isn't completely the end of the story yet. Congressman Ogles remains under investigation by the House Ethics Committee. Of course, we'll be on this story until the last chapter is written and let you know what happens.